We are with Marshall Glatzer, Cantor Marshall Glatzer.
Am I in the way?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Okay. So let's start with, how long have you been in the cantorate?
I graduated from School of Sacred Music in 1953, and I was a cantor since then.
Yeah. How would you describe what your cantorial style was like in those days?
In those days, I would say you're going to say it's today. It's the classical reform style. It did not include guitar or anything like that. The music that I used primarily was music of Binder, Fried, Helfman. This was my style.
How did your role as a clergy person evolve in your pulpit? Or did it evolve?
Oh yes, it did. Eventually I was doing weddings. When I first came to the congregation, I came primarily as educational director. My cantorial, I was told, you don't have to be on the pulpit every week. And I said that you won't be able to keep me off. I did that educational director for several years, and until I reached the point where I said, I have too much responsibility as far as the B'nai Mitzvah. We were having as many as 40, 50 bat mitzvahs a year. And I was involved in
Just checking.
in the training of the B'nai Mitzvah, but I started to develop a number of choirs, and the amount of time that I spent in music was more than I wanted to give to education as an educational director. So we were able to work that out after a few years.
Looking back, what was your favorite responsibility as a cantor?
Just being there for the people. Being there for the congregation.
Being a real clergy.
Yeah.
Looking back over those years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of change in the American cantorate. Can you speak about these changes and what has been the most beneficial for the cantorate in general, or the ACC?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Of course, the advent of women coming into the cantorate made a big change. I think the camp style services came back into the congregations, and more became the norm. I think in some respects it was good for the congregation. It gave them a sense of participation, which was lacking, and they created more of a spiritual aspect of the service. But what it did, I'm afraid, is to minimize the music, the classical music of the synagogue. Eric Werner, Oliver Scholem would rail against it And he was right. He said it was the death of the end of authentic Jewish music.
What advice would you give a newly invested cantor?
Stay in one place. Don't go looking around. If you find a congregation, if you get into a congregation that you feel comfortable with, stay there.